Welcome to this week's Rural School Advocates of Iowa Capital Recap video. I'm Margaret Buckton, your RSAI professional advocate. Before we dig into today's agenda, this video is going to be a little bit longer than usual. We try and keep the weekly update to 5 to 10 minutes. We've got a lot to share with you, new resources, and two of the biggest issues that are facing schools, school funding and property tax reform. So stick with us. We're going to talk about the 2026 session timetable and how to find your legislator, especially if you're a new school board member or a new superintendent. The governor's budget recommendation that impacts school funding. Property tax proposals, both the Senate and the governor have bills out. The House we expect to see next week. What's next? Lots of subcommittees. What's coming soon? School funding and SSA advocacy actions for the week. The session timetable is part of the House and Senate rules, and it sets those really important funnel deadlines for when bills have to move forward in order to continue consideration. The first one is February 20th, Friday of the 6th week. If the bill doesn't get out of the committee of the Chamber of Origin, so a House bill getting out of a House Education Committee, for example, and vice versa in the Senate, then it's technically dead. And of course, they can regenerate some of that content in other ways, but it's a great way to winnow down the over 2,000 bills that are going to be introduced to just a few hundred that will get to the governor's desk. That second funnel deadline, March 20th, is even harder. They don't stop coming if their work isn't done, but per diem payments to legislators to cover their expenses will stop on April 21st. So they like to get finished by that time. If you want to know who your legislators are, and it's good to refresh and get their current contact information, you can go to the legislative webpage, www.legis.iowa.gov, click on the Legislators tab, and you can go in there by your own address, by the city that you live in, by your zip code, but especially if you're a school leader, it's important to look at by school district so you can see all of the legislators that represent part of your school district territory. I was at a subcommittee this morning that was chaired by Representative Ann Meyer out of Fort Dodge, so I picked on you guys. Senator Tim Kreinbrink is the senator that represents all of the Fort Dodge Community School District voters. He is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which is a really important post. Welcome Representative Wendy Larson, new representative out of House District 7 in a special election, and then Representative Ann Meyer has been around for a long time. You can also see your Congress people and senators at the federal level, which is really important with all the things going on in Washington. And do reach out to them. They will often get back to you. A lot of the information we're going to share today about funding and property tax reform regarding the governor's proposals comes from three sources: the governor's vision for Iowa, the Legislative Services Agency's analysis of her recommendations, and the Department of Management, that's the budget arm of the executive branch, their description of the budget proposals. So school funding. Governor Reynolds is recommending a 2% increase in the per pupil cost, that's known as State Supplementary Assistance, or SSA, for fiscal year 2027. It includes an increase of $73 million for regular program district cost, but that's not $73 million in new spending authority for school districts. More than half of that, $42 million, is state money to offset what would otherwise be budget guarantee property taxes. It also grows categorical funds by 2%. That's applied to the state cost per pupil for the categorical fund. Your individual categorical funds are likely higher than the state cost per pupil, in some cases quite a bit higher, so that doesn't mean a 2% increase in that line item for you. That number on a statewide basis is up $22 million because of growth in education savings account enrollment, and that's the categorical enrollment that generates the categorical funds for those resident districts. It continues the $25 million in AEA reduction that's been going on for several years, but the governor explicitly says her plan to remove that $25 million from the AEAs. And because statewide enrollment is down 7,336 students, this 2% SSA increase works out to be a 1.47% increase in combined district cost. School funding doesn't just impact public schools, it also impacts private schools. With the education savings account, that account amount goes up per student to match the regular program district cost per student. They had an appropriation almost $350 million in fiscal 27. This is an increase of $22 million or 6.6% in order to meet that 2% SSA number and the growth in the estimated number of students that will qualify for an ESA. Charter schools. This appropriation of $20 million is for charter schools for fiscal 27. That's an increase of 66%, or $8.8 million. And that includes the SSA and the growth in the number of charter school pupils. There were 3 more charter schools approved on the State Board of Education's agenda today. The Transportation Equity Fund is for public schools. It grows by 2% in the governor's budget recommendation, just between $600,000 and $700,000. There isn't a whole lot in the governor's proposal about education policy recommendations. The Vision for Iowa document only mentions 2 that impact public school policies directly, banning food dyes from school lunch and actually putting into the Iowa Code the E-Verify and SAVE immigration background checks, and we're not sure that's going to impact local governments or just state government. And the Department of Education has several pre-filed bills, such as the one that affects talented and gifted programming and requires accelerated math and English language arts programs. So we'll be watching for subcommittees in those areas. Most of the governor's education policy is all about charter schools, enabling all of the state per pupil funding to follow a student to the charter school, ensuring charter school students access those college credits through concurrent enrollment courses, allowing the charter school student to participate in extracurricular activities at their public school district of residence if their charter school doesn't offer them, naming charter schools as approved settings for student teachers to get experience and earn their degrees with their practicums, and requiring charter schools to provide driver education for their students. So that's enough about education policy for a minute. We're going to shift gears and talk about property tax proposals. The Senate early this week read in their bill into the agenda, Senate Study Bill 3001. It mostly continues last year's ideas with changes to dates and deadlines, but there are 2 new ideas. One of those is that homeowners age 60 and older who don't have a mortgage on their house would eventually pay no property taxes. There's a several-year phase-in to accomplish that. They also have a homestead credit that's much more generous, especially compared to current law. The homestead credit is only $4,840. The homestead credit in this plan, once fully phased in, is 25% of up to $350,000. That will put a big nick in the total valuation that is to be taxed. The state continues, like in the old bill last year, to assume the total cost of the additional levy. That's 100% foundation level, so that $685 per student in the current formula that is on property taxes in the local district, that will be relieved by state funding. It is unclear how much of that will be coming from the SAVE fund as opposed to just state taxes. There are proposed limitations on the management fund levy. They're the same as last year. If a district has more than 180% of the prior 3 years' expenditures carried forward as an ending balance, they're prohibited from levying more. That doesn't limit expenditures or tax rates. It just limits whether or not you can tax if you have a big ending balance. They phase out rollbacks, and they limit voter-approved levies to 70% of the existing rate limitations. Now, the governor's recommendation for property tax relief was introduced in both the House and Senate. It's much more modest. There are many things in here on limitations on revenue growth that specifically says does not impact schools, but I'll talk about the 4 provisions that do impact schools. The first is moving the assessment schedule from every 2 years to every 3 years. The second is limiting the overuse of TIF increment financing, TIF districts. That's the governor's language in the vision document. That's not my language. But it does require that any taxes be collected for schools on the TIF increment, and then that tax revenue goes to the school districts. There's no TIF diversion for schools on any school taxes. They freeze property tax bills for seniors age 65 and up in homes valued at $350,000 or less. So targets a slightly different audience for tax relief for senior citizens than the Senate version. The bottom one on the right is the most problematic for schools, in my opinion. It accelerates the SAVE, or Secure and Advanced Vision of Education funding. That's the state penny for school infrastructure. It accelerates that amount, the amount of that money that's going to tax relief. And here's how it works. So in the current year, SAVE is estimated to generate $645 million. If SAVE revenues grow at any time by more than 2%, additional money is carved out that goes to the Property Tax Equity and Relief Fund and doesn't go to school districts for school infrastructure. For this current year, before any of that money is diverted to property tax relief or goes to schools, SAVE pays for $5 million in appropriation to expand career and technical education academies. And then there's the money that goes to property tax relief, the additional revenues. And in this year, it's $32 million that goes to the Property Tax Equity and Relief Fund for adjusted additional levy that buys down the highest property tax additional levies in the state, and that helps property poor districts who have higher levies. And then there's also $10 million for the foundation-based supplement, and that bids up the foundation level so that all districts, regardless of property value per student, get some tax relief. Plus, there's the state general fund appropriation, another $24 million into that Property Tax Equity and Relief Fund, known as the Peter Fund. So if you want to know what would happen in current law, we go back to 2019, House File 546, which added those career technical academies funding streams out of SAVE. They estimated in that fiscal note that it would take until fiscal year 2048 to get to 30% of the total SAVE funding stream dedicated to property tax relief. By 2030, that would be $770 million for schools and $330 million for property taxpayers. The governor's plan really accelerates that, and instead of taking until 2048, tries to accomplish it in 4 years. So by 2030, there would be 30% of SAVE revenue going to property tax savings. That would be over $190 million. Maybe more than that, depending on growth in the SAVE fund. And we really have concerns about that with over 175 districts who have bonded against the SAVE revenue stream and are using it for really important things like updating their bus fleet and technology and equipment, including safety equipment and things for cybersecurity. Look for talking points in your weekly report. Okay, what's next? Not just funding, but property tax relief. There were a lot of bills introduced this week, 18 in the House Education Committee, 22 now in the Senate Education Committee. And of those, the ones on your screen have subcommittees scheduled for next week. If any of these are of interest to you, you can look in your weekly report and see a link to the bill and actually read the language. You could just give me a call and say, what does this do? You could provide some feedback. How is this going to impact your district? Our folks, either Dave Doughton or myself, will go to these subcommittees and provide testimony on how these things are going to impact schools. The very first one on the list, Senate File 205, has a school start date no earlier than the Monday before the last Monday in August. That bill actually got out of the Senate Education Committee last year, and they're going to revisit it and presumably move it again. And we were supportive of that last year. What's coming soon? Or what may not be? Is it coming or not? The governor's SSA recommendation started the ball rolling on that 30-day time limit for the legislature to set SSA. So their deadline's February 11th. It's in Iowa code, but the legislature has the power to ignore their own laws by notwithstanding, that's the technical lingo to say, that law does not apply to this bill. And they likely will wait. They've got a couple of motivations. The first is that there are several Republicans in both the House and Senate who don't want to vote on anything until the eminent domain for carbon pipelines is handled. And then, of course, the Revenue Estimating Conference meets in March. Now, the REC in December set a revenue growth estimate of 4.2% for fiscal 27. They are bound in Iowa law to have a budget that is no larger than the 99% expenditure limitation applied to the lowest estimate of either December or March. So if they think something's going to go down in March, they might want to wait. It does set the stage and timeline for SSA advocacy. So you've got at least a month and maybe a little bit longer to convince them that 2% is not enough. Check out the advocacy materials on school funding that we have for you. The position paper is on the legislative website. Contact legislators this week and every week until a bill is signed. And remember, the best advocacy that works is gentle persuasion applied relentlessly. Keep it coming every single week until they decide. Here are some talking points for you. The fiscal 27 2.0 recommendation is again below inflation. It invests less state money in public schools than in the current year, and since enrollment has dropped by over 7,000 students, many school districts will be on budget guarantee and looking at reducing staff. The REC estimated that 4.2% increase in state revenues for fiscal 27. Shouldn't schools receive the benefit of that revenue increase coming out of the income tax phase-in, the cuts that were to income taxes? You can remind them, SSA increases in the last 5 years have all fallen short of covering inflation, and that means your school districts have lost purchasing power and can't have salaries competitive with the private sector or other states. The governor recommends $42 million to relieve budget guarantee property taxes. Investing that $42 million in a higher SSA rate would still relieve budget guarantee property taxes. It would lower the amount of special ed deficits that go on property taxes and English language learner deficits too. It is really important that we generate more to help pay for mandated teacher salary minimums, especially in our smaller districts that are suffering from declining enrollment. So they should invest that $42 million in a higher SSA rate. Iowa has fallen further behind when you compare us to other states in the nation. We're now short over $2,700 per student in expenditures. That ranks Iowa near the bottom, 9th out of 12 in the Midwest, 34th in the nation. Our teacher pay investments over the last couple of years are really welcome and necessary, but they'll soon erode if regular school aid doesn't keep pace. So look to the RSAI website for advocacy resources, talking points, and data to help you make the case. So you can find that on the legislative page. The RSAI 2026 legislative priorities are linked there. You can share those with legislators and other stakeholders in your community. You can get that adequate school resources position paper to give you lots more talking points and data. The most important thing is a little bit of head and heart. Share the story of your district. What's this going to do for students? And then show them the information that's data-based as to why they need to have an investment in more funding. Thanks to our RSAI corporate sponsors. We appreciate their support and connection to rural school districts. Check out the corporate sponsor page on the RSAI website for more information about how to access their services. If you have a company or service that you think would be supportive of rural schools, please send them our way. You can get so much more from the website, access our position papers, the weekly reports, calls to action, and these videos. Check out this week's detailed written report for all of the actions at the State House, including the links to the bills that we have subcommittees on next week, and let us know how you feel about them. We'll see you next time.